and gentlemen, analysts and associates, welcome to your Managing Director Secretary's favorite podcast, the Big Swinging Decks Podcast by Litquidity and Moran. This is not financial advice. You'd be a bottom bucket analyst to make investment decisions based on what is discussed on this show.
Welcome back to another edition of Big Swinging Decks. Lit, how are we? You're laughing over there. What's going on? What's new? What's unusual?
Let's see. Been fucking slammed. Okay, so
you've been busy. What have you been busy doing? Can you tell the shareholders?
We'll say this after our little ad read, but things are cooking. Okay. Things are fucking cooking, Mark.
Things are cooking, and in this episode, we're gonna be in the kitchen cooking with what we have on the stove. That's about as far as I can take that reference, but we got a lot to discuss in this episode. We're going to talk about what's in the kitchen, what's on the stove. We are going to discuss our best and worst banking stories that the shareholders have requested, and then we are going to play a little special edition of Cash or Pass. So, Lit, we alluded to this briefly, but what's in the kitchen, what's on the stove? What have you been so busy with?
Yeah, I'll try to be high level just because, the
30,000-foot overview. Don't get too granular.
Yeah, the pedophiles at the SEC are always looking down everyone's neck here. And so I've been talking to investors, and, we're trying to put together a little bit of funding for Litquidity Media and trying to grow this to the next level. So I can't really give too many details or really solicit anything, but it's coming, and if you know, and that's pretty much where I'll keep it.
Is this something, if I'm a normal shareholder, because oftentimes, I get a lot of these MILFs on the Upper East Side are like, oh my God, Mark, I want to be your sugar mama. Like, what can I do to invest in any business enterprises you're part of? And I'm like, listen, don't even worry. I'll hook you up. I'll have the lawyers from Goodwin send over a safe note and, start the process. But, for our shareholders, how can people get involved? Can they, if we were to open it up? Is that something maybe we'd think about?
Well, I mean, you get into the whole thing about general solicitation where you can't really advertise publicly and solicit investments from people unless, there's...
And that's because you don't know who's accredited or who's not, because those rules are really important. Because I think the fact that we have securities laws based off of 1934 was the Securities Act of what?
I don't fucking know. Yeah, I studied that for the
it seems relevant.
Yeah, those are things I fucking forgot, and I wish that were still in my brain from all the series exams that I studied.
Yeah, the point I'm making is that I just feel like being regulated by securities laws, that are 90 years old. I don't know how great of an idea that is. But anyway, so we can't do that to the general public.
But
maybe
you can,
if you're an accredited investor.
But Mark,
what could you do?
You could definitely reach out to your sugar mamas, because if they're living on the Upper East Side, they definitely... have that net worth of
it's more their husbands who would have the. No, I'm kidding. That's a joke for legal purposes. That's a joke. But theoretically, if someone were to want access to this, we have an accredited investors list that they could sign up for, and potentially there could be information in the future.
Potentially, but we'll potentially, just potentially.
Listen, as a lawyer, it's all potential. Nothing's real. But okay. So anyway. One interesting thing I wanted to get your opinion on real quick, actually, is so there was this academic study that came out on April 21st. And so it was by, I can't pronounce these professors' names, but it was by these two, professors, presumably intelligent people. And they wanted to study the effect of protected weekends, protected Saturdays on banks, right? And so they focused on equity research analysts, which obviously isn't the same as bankers, but is, kind of a close proxy. And they basically kind of, the data they used was just Uber rides and taxi rides to and from bank offices, right? So they were kind of able to create some type of proxy to measure working hours and stuff. And what was really interesting is, so their thesis was that with these banks putting in these protected weekends, it doesn't necessarily make it so the kids are working less. It's that the working hours are spread out differently. So people are working later into the night during the days they are working to make up for that time on the weekend. And what this study found, and obviously this was with equity research analysts, so you can only imagine what it would have been with investment banking analysts or associates. But they found that the number of, basically the number of forecast errors from these analysts increased by 12% after this policy was put into place. So essentially that because the kids are working later into the night, presumably on less sleep, because they have to compensate for not being able to work on the weekends or Saturday, that they're making more mistakes because they're working later in the night. And like, I think that's hilarious. And definitely is true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first, why would they focus on equity research when I don't think they work past like 6 p.m. or something like that, if it's, regular hours outside of earnings season. But that's also just, how do you really track like the number of errors? But all that said, I do think, I'm not trying to shit on it. I honestly think that it's correct that, like everyone's working more during the weekdays to try to salvage whatever they can of a weekend. And that does lead to longer hours, more sleepiness, tiredness, fatigue, whatever, and more errors. So that's interesting that there's empirical data around that now.
Empirical is a great vocab word, but yeah, I mean, it's you're right. Like, it's funny to track the errors. It's like, if you're so good at tracking these errors, why don't you go, work at the bank, right? Instead of doing the study.
Right?
But I mean,
they could be getting paid way better.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Actually, let's transition this, because one of the things that our shareholders have really asked for is they want to get to know us a little bit more, and they wanted to hear our best and worst banking stories. And so I know for you, you're gonna have to be a little bit more vague on things, and I'll try and be vulnerable and authentic and give the full story to stuff, because that probably makes it funnier. But I think it's something that, like, in thinking about the mistakes, and I was just like thinking in my head, man, like if I knew what the mistakes were when I was doing stuff, and trust me, I've made a lot of mistakes, I would have corrected it. So it's just the idea of like being able to find mistakes or, miss multiples or blah, 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 stuff that doesn't tie.
Yep.
It's a funny thing to reflect on that, because I very much do view it as like a former life, as I'm sure you do as well. And it's just, it's fascinating. And so to kick it off, I want to know you can do best or worst first. I don't care. But like, what's one story for you that sticks out from your banking days?
Yeah. I mean, so I wouldn't know if I'd call this the best one, but it's definitely up there, and just, it was a great feeling at the time, and then hungover as fuck the next day. But let's throw this back a few years. It was a holiday party, and it was cold as hell in New York. I went out with my group. We went to a venue where there is ping pong, and everyone was just fucking playing. And there was a VP who had like a special shiny, polished, paddle that was like $3,000. And
a paddle, like a fraternity hazing paddle.
Sure, but in the form of a circle that you use to hit balls back and forth.
Oh, like an actual ping pong paddle is what you're saying.
Yeah, like an actual ping pong paddle.
I wasn't following. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. So he has a $3,000 ping pong.
Yeah. Some absurd shit, and he had like that weird kind of like I forget the hold. It's not like holding it normally. It's like that professional hold.
It's kind of like inverted, right? Like it's It's like
the Olympians always play like that. Yeah. And he was
were you in the Hong Kong office or something?
No, he was international, but so the point is, I don't even know why we're hung up on the ping pong aspect. We were all just like having a great time. We were drinking. Everyone's like, I think this was my first holiday party. So open bars, very young in the city. Like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna get bombed and run up the tab, and. So I did, and I played a couple of games of ping pong. It was excellent. I won a couple, and then actually ended up losing to this guy. So I was like, okay, look, I mean, whatever. I knew I was going to lose. But then after the whole tournament was over, a bunch of us ended up going to an analyst's apartment, and I barely remember this at this point, and just ended up blacking out and smoking a fuck ton of weed. And mind you, all of this was in the middle of a live deal that I was on that was like still firing on all cylinders, but they were like, hey, you know, take the night off and you can get in the next morning. And whatever. And like we had a call scheduled, I think like 9 or 10 a.m. with the management team. So so fast forward, you know, I blacked the fuck out and ended up falling asleep because I was stoned as shit too, and woke up at like 8 a.m. in like, you know, this analyst's apartment, and just like had, you know, my whole holiday attire and whatever is still on. I had to walk back home. This was like right before the call was happening. Just walked across town back to my apartment, still like really fucking drunk. And the first thing I do when I get back to my apartment is take a shit. and that was literally like the moment that I had to get on the call. And I was like, oh fuck. So I'm like like still drunk, taking a shit like in the bathroom, and I had to dial in and just like announce myself and like say little things, you know, in the beginning. And this VP, who actually was the one that won the ping pong tournament, was like, hey, like, you know, do we have so-and-so on, right? Lit. And I'm like, and the management team was on, and they're like, okay, well, you know, whatever. And so I ended up showing up to the office like noon or 1 p.m. and I was like the last one in, got a standing ovation. And yeah, that was, you know, excluding some details that I won't say here, but it was a pretty fucking funny night and whole sequence.
I love it. I love it. Let's see. Okay, so in Christmas parties, so I think this is interesting. It's quite the dichotomy of Christmas parties. So when in my first year at Lazard, so there, like, Lazard used to be very different than it is now. Like now it is very, and I'm sitting and I'm looking out my window at the top of the 30 Rock because I can see it from here, which kind of creeps me out sometimes. But you know, now it's very, you know, it's a publicly traded company. They went public in 2005 with Wasserstein in charge. But prior to him being in charge, it was a very different organization. Like one time in one of these podcasts, I mentioned how there was this book that would have the partner's home address, and then it would have their hotel address there, right, where the mistress was. So, like, you know, it was different, you know, than it is now. And they used to have models working on the 63rd floor, which is like the top one where all the clients would go for meetings. Now that's not the case. But so I remember basically they had some let's say incidents at holiday parties in the past. So they, you know, tried to make it, you know, much more PC, which meant having it on, and so, you know, anyone who's familiar with 30 Rock, you know that there's the concourse of the terminal below where all the shops are. They literally had the
That's
Christmas
the one, like,
party
in the basement?
Yes,
or
yeah,
the basement
exactly.
level.
And so it's like if you were to go down there, then the rink is there and everything you can see at that level. So they literally had the Christmas party at the bottom floor in a corner, like just a gated off corner of the fucking concourse.
Like not in one of the restaurants down there?
Yeah, no. Like it was just like, you know, there was like folding tables with like a, you know, the it was just, it's like, this is Lazard Frere. Okay. All right. This is not what I imagined. Yeah, Lazard Frere. I mean, I'm sure you could Lazard Frere. Like, I'm sure there's way. I don't know if you know. I went to French immersion school up until 3rd grade. We started doing long division in 3rd grade, and then I wasn't going well for me. So my parents were like, "Let's throw him in Catholic school." It was also behavior problems, but that's another story.
Right, back on track.
Back on track. But yeah, so that was like, and we all just went back to work after, and I remember being like, it was like a Thursday. And, you know, you had like one drink and I'm back working until 2 a.m. Like, this is so fucking miserable. Like, what is the point here? I'm like, is this like what it's like?
Yeah.
And so then flash forward to one of my Centerview Christmas parties where basically like they tell you your bonus the same day that the party is. So like you're like in a really good mood. And so I'd like gone to my buddy's place before. We get to the venues at like 2:35 for the first part, and then we went to Marquee afterwards when all of like the senior people would leave, but one kind of relatively mid or senior person would have to come to kind of supervise. And so like basically like you're at this thing, and this is where they promote people to partner. And so it's a really like big, like you make partner at Centerview, like you're popping bottles, right? Like it is a very big accomplishment. And so like people are in great moods. And like one of the few kind of like females who worked there she kept coming over to like my group of associates, being like, boys, like make sure you eat food. And we're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like I'm not gonna black out. I'm an adult. And so, you know,
famous last words, yeah.
Right? Yeah, famous last words. Like you keep drinking, you're having a good time. So end up getting a marquee, having a blast. Like, you know, I'm Instagram storying like the girls with the bottles, like all that stuff. And then it kind of starts to fade for me. And, you know, I don't have that great of a recollection of it, right? So I wake up the next day at about 11:30 and I'm sweating, like I'm nervous. And so I wake up, I don't know where my phone is. I'm able to like go in on the VPN, log in, see I got a shit ton of emails because I had a meeting with a CEO, like not me personally, like all of us who were on this deal team with a CEO who had worked with in the past at 1 o'clock. So I'm like, shit, I got to put on a suit and tie, get there by 1. Like I probably still smell like alcohol. So I shower, like I'm like emailing the girl I was dating at the time, like, cause I don't have my phone on me. And so then I realized like I have my work phone. So I find my work phone like in a bag somewhere. And then I get that, I'm like texting her and she's like, yeah, we'll talk about this later. I'm like, what do you mean? I have no context to any of this, right? And she's like, yeah, your behavior last night. And I'm like, I didn't see you last night. So like, I don't know what you're talking about.
You shit on her bed.
And hey, no Amber Heard stuff. And so what I come to find out as I'm going into the office, you know, call this noon right now, right? So I have 90 minutes to get to this meeting, is that apparently after Marquee, I had walked from Marquee to her place. I had somehow convinced the doorman to let me in and go up, and then I got into the apartment because it was a really easy, like, locked, you know, it's like one of the, when, like, 3 girls are living together in their early 20s, like, you know, like, the apartment's not that great, right? So I was able to, somehow I picked the lock, like, with a credit card.
Dude, what the fuck?
You know, and I'm black, I get in, and I just climb into bed with her, apparently, and she's like, what the fuck? And then I was being obnoxious at, like, 5:30 in the morning, so she kicks me out. So then I make it back to my apartment somehow, and so then I woke up at 11:30, and I was like, okay, but I didn't have my phone on me, so, like, I didn't have a lot of detail.
You left it at her place, then?
Well, I didn't know where the phone was at this point. Like, I was just trying to figure out what was going on. And she's like, yeah, you know, and don't worry. Like, I saw the Instagram story with the girls with the bottles. And I was like, well, I mean, that was funny. You know, like, we're all there. Like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm just, like, stressed to the max. And so then I get to the office. So I got like 45 minutes. Then the head of business development at this other company, like a large health insurer, this dude, he listens to it. He's a solid guy. I love the guy. He knows who he is when he's listening to this. But he texts me. He's like, man, heard you went like a little bit wild at the Christmas party, and like, how you feeling this morning? You get some Advil and Pedialyte? And I was like, what? He knows about this? What the fuck's going on?
Yeah.
And I found out I had missed a call with that client earlier when I was sleeping. So then, like, I'm putting my tie on in the bathroom. I'm about to walk into the meeting, and then one of the MDs looks at me and goes, you look like shit today. And I was like, okay, like, you're disheveled and, you know, pretty morbidly obese, and you're telling me I look like shit. It's like, it may be sweating alcohol, but, like, I thought I looked good until that. Then, you know, as a classic, you know, junior banker does, I go into the meeting, I handed out the decks, I said a few comments, nothing of substance, and then just sat there and pretended to take notes. So then the meeting's over. I still had no idea where my phone was, my personal phone. I had my work phone, right? So I'm, like, pinging it. And then it turned on because it started tracking it. And I'm like, wait, that's like right near me. So I kept hitting the Find My iPhone button, that really loud ringing button, right?
Okay.
And I'm walking around the office at Centerview. I can't find it. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I was like, it's got to be playing. It says it's playing. It's clearly going to be annoying someone. What's going on? And I just kind of gave up. And, like, my girlfriend wasn't talking to me at the time. Like, I, you know, had one deal team irritated at me. And then I didn't do anything in a meeting. So, like, I wasn't feeling that great about myself. And then I go down into the lobby, and I'm on the elevator with one of the guys who he was like a barista and chef at Centerview, because there was a barista and then a whole, like, private kitchen staff.
Oh, we'll get back to that one, because I want to ask about that barista.
Okay.
But
and so I'm like, fuck it, you know, I'll try one more time. I'll hit the Find My thing on my work phone. So I hit the button. And then I start hearing the noise, and it's in the guy's hand. And I'm like, wait, you have my phone? And he's like, oh, yeah, bro, like someone left this at the table because he came to Marquee with us. And he's like, someone left this on the table and I didn't know. So I just took it trying to figure out whose it was. I'm like, oh, my God. So I found my personal phone. And then because of that, me and that guy were boys afterwards. And so whenever I would walk in, my mocha that I would get would always be ready. And like all these partners would be in line. And I just walk up, grab it at 9 o'clock. And then they'd be like, how the fuck is Moran getting his shit before us? It's like, you know, just Christmas party stuff. What can I say?
Oh, great fucking story. So wait, would you bucket that as one of the best or the worst? Because that sounds like it could be
looking
either
back,
or.
it was one of the best. But like, you know, I mean, I think that's like one of the interesting things in kind of like, you know, we never would have been able to reflect on it this way, you know, in the moment. But like, because you're so stressed in the moment, right? Like everything seems so important. Everything seems like this is do or die. And then you look back and it's like, that was so stupid to be stressed about. That's actually hilarious. But at the time, no, I didn't find it funny at all. Like I was super stressed. I was very embarrassed about that, about what potentially my behavior would have been or, you know, anything stupid I could have done. But like in looking back, like I'm telling this story on a podcast and it's just hilarious to me.
I mean, I feel like all these stories could be compiled and like put into a nice little sitcom format. Right, like
100%.
let's package this up and put it to in front of like a Netflix or HBO. You know, like anyone here who's listening, who works at Netflix or HBO, hit us up because we got a ton of these. Like, there's no shortage of these stories. They all kind of involve alcohol. It all involves like doing stupid shit. And a little bit of drama.
if we were gonna start a series of this is how I'd want the series to start, because this is definitely like one of the worst moments, and it's true. And this is a story, and this is just gonna be me winging my recollection of this. So,
all right, so you start like, seeing here, like you fade in.
Exactly. You may be wondering how I got here, and then it zooms into me at a rural Virginia Advanced Auto Parts, frantically trying to buy a charger that I could plug the Dell laptop I was using into it. Then that would stick in the cigarette lighter of the rental car that I had, that the girl I was dating at the time was driving. Because, so like I was dating this girl. Great person, individual, you know, she's great. Didn't work out for us, right? So I dated her the majority of my time in banking, which is probably why we're not together, right? And so this is kind of like at the tail end of a relationship. So like she's not pleased with me at all. You know, nothing's going well. And I'm working on like this big deal for a very large client as kind of like it was like a coming of age deal, right? So I was taking it super seriously, but we had to go to our parents' place in a state that was 8 hours away, let's call it. And so I'm like, I was going to drive because she wasn't the best driver in the world. And so I was driving, but then something happens, right? As it always does in a deal, like just something just pops up and I had to start taking care of it. I was on a phone with like corp dev team at this company, like all this shit, and it's going on. I'm in the fucking car in Virginia, which the cell phone reception isn't that great. So I'm cutting in and out half the time. And I didn't bring like a charger to use in the car because I was like, oh, nothing's going to, and this is how it always happens. You're like, nothing's going to blow up. Nothing's going to blow my weekend up or whatever, right? And so obviously something happened. So then I'm like, shit, you know, this Dell has 3 hours of battery life, let's call it. So we start dropping and we start getting more and more into rural Virginia and the battery's just dropping. And I was like, oh, fuck. And then calls are getting scheduled. I'm like, this is not going to be good.
Fuck that, dude, yeah.
Right? So you like the anxiety is just setting in. And it's something like looking back, like it's kind of, but it's like, you know, I'd be typing, then I pick my head up and like we'd be like a foot away from a, you know, 18-wheeler. I'm like, come on, like focus on the road. Like this is ridiculous. So I'm thinking I'm going to die in the car, number one. I have the stress of everything going on. Like the cell phone reception's horrible. It's just like, my VPN keeps going in and out. I'm connected to the iPad. It's just
they're
like,
so
super
slow,
stressful.
right?
Right? Exactly. And so it's just like, this is horrible. And then the other thing too is like basically we had been told that we didn't need to adjust for stock-based compensation on this thing, but then we actually had to. And so then we're like trying to build this toggle for SBC, and it's like, number one, what the fuck is going on with SBC? Because I was doing healthcare, I never had to like deal with that shit. And so then it's like, what the fuck? And like me and the analysts are just like, shit, all right, we're building this in, like we're trying to figure this out. It's just super stressful all around. I'm like, this is not going to be a good weekend. So then we get to be about like an hour away from her house, and she goes, oh, okay, well, what'd you bring my parents for a welcome gift? And I'm like, yo, I saw your parents like 2 weeks ago. What? And then this turns into this massive argument. Massive. because I didn't bring a second welcome gift. And I'm like, well, come on, like I'm busy, but like also like as anyone who's like a young banker or like whatever does, you think that your job is more important than someone's, and you're like, well, I'm working, so you should have told me if I was supposed to do something, which, I don't know. Somewhat fair, somewhat not. But, I obviously didn't get a gift. And so then I have to drop what I'm doing with work to then like start like Googling. Yeah, like I'm Googling home goods. I'm Googling all these things.
Come on.
And so, and I'm failing, right? It's just It's getting to be later in the evening. Everything's closed. It's just everything is just going horribly. And I was like,
you're like, I'm not getting laid this weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just like there with like your head in your hands, right? Like like everyone's been there where you're just like you're so stressed and just like I was like emasculated and just like, oh my god, like why did I choose this? I could have like not gone to like graduate school and been a consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton in Arlington, Virginia. Like, if I didn't do anything, like what the fuck? And you're just like wondering about all your life consequences, and which is funny because it's like. I never hear anyone like actually like talk about an experience like this, so I'm trying to like remember as vividly as I can because I like it would have been something helpful for me to listen to had I been going through that, because it's like you think it's the most important thing in the world and like everything's gonna be horrible, but like I don't know, I'm much happier now like having gone through those experiences. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. You just don't realize it at the time.
You just
so
don't
I'm super
realize
stressed.
It.
Yeah, right. Like so I'm super stressed. Then we get to her parents' place. So then we're doing family time and stuff. And every night I would have to sit and watch the news till about 11. And so I'd have to sit there and I couldn't.
What kind of news, if you don't mind me asking?
With Fox News.
Okay,
Fox News. We're sitting watching Fox News till 11.
All right.
And I'm like, man, I already saw Hannity at 8. Tucker saying the same thing at 9. And then we're repeating it at 10.
Yeah.
Right. Like I get the talking points, guys. You know what I mean? Like, gotcha. Like I can walk into the local, VAW or what is it? VFW, the local VFW, and do a stump campaign run for office. I got it. But I'm sitting there and I couldn't go on my phone because it would look bad, and then I would be like have the phone to my side trying to like check if I got emails, go in the bathroom upstairs, like pretend I was I don't know what, because I would be there for 15 minutes on a phone call and finding out what me and the analyst screwed up with the SBC, and like you're just sweating and you come down like not feeling good and it's going horribly, and then at 11 o'clock that's when the work would actually begin, and luckily the analyst I was working with, he was going through a similar experience. So we're both at our girlfriends' places, and like I was in like her like younger brother's room or something, and it was like an older house, so like the sound would travel. So I'd be up till 3-4 in the morning. I would just then have to throw
Wait, was her younger
blankets.
brother there though? Or
no, he was sleeping in like the basement or something.
Okay.
Yeah. Good clarifying part. Yeah, no, like he would sleep in the basement. I would get his room, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I would have covers over my head, whispering with my fucking analyst. He was doing the same thing at his girlfriend's place with covers over his head in like Georgia. And we're just and I'm like, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. It's 3:30 in the morning. We're trying to figure out this thing for stock-based compensation for a private company that this large public company is buying in their like first foray into like a tech company. And the funniest thing to me about the whole thing is the CEO of this company, he was chilling in Hawaii at his like $80 million place. Because he was about to get this massive payoff. And like we're sitting there like under fucking sheets whispering on the phone so no one else could hear and think we're like working too much, because it's like it's like a it's a badge of honor in like a New York City culture and like this kind of service professional culture to work a lot, but to everywhere in like real America it's not, and that's not something that is good oftentimes, and it can like separate you from like people you care about and stuff, and it's just like this is just like the wildest experience. And I look back thinking about that, just about how much stress I had and like anxiety, and I think the worst part too, like when you're like the first Christmas you have or the first few, when you're just have left school, whether it's undergrad or grad school, is like looking at your friends who have like normal lives and they're skiing or they're hanging out with their family or whatever, and you're just like there on your computer at like your family's dining room table. It's just like, that's the worst.
It's sad. You're never gonna get those years back, right? That's like you're fucking spending that like as a machine in the middle of the holidays, prime family time, whatever, and you're just there. This has to get done. Like the client needs it. And the client's like in Hawaii, you're just fucking chilling.
Yeah. and like the client never looks at it, right? It's like I mean, I think about it, it's very funny to me now because like for the stuff we're doing with RCI, you know, we're very much their service provider. And, you know, I'm thinking about it, like if we were a traditional bank and shit, you know, we'd be reviewing all this stuff we're sending out, you know, really just like, you know, uptight about everything. And it's like, I just wing it. We wing it. And, you know, it works out better and we have better relationships with like the senior management there, right? Than it would be just like this approach that you take of like, oh, well, this is the client, like the client come. And it's like, yeah, but like if the client is hiring you for advice, then, you know, you can be able to push back a little bit. Like, but in this commoditized world that we're starting to live in, if you're not, you know, a Bruce Wasserstein, you know,
you have all the competition there, right? Like you can't afford sometimes to just, you know, push back a little bit. They're like, you know what, fuck that. Goldman's going to work 24/7. So I feel like, again, like it has to be a kind of pushback. I think I mentioned this in one of our first episodes, but like the entire industry has to sort of realize and like say, look, I mean, we can't all fucking be doing this all the time, but I'm a pessimist.
Well, I have a question for you. What do you think happens in the future with this? With, you know, kind of the changing of preferences in work, things becoming more casual. You know, we see all this stuff with Goldman, but like, how does this actually affect banking? Aside from RBC doing TikToks in the office.
Yeah. Oh man, the UBS. Credit Suisse actually got into that cringe.
That's
game.
not surprising.
Yeah, it was bad. I'll have to post that on Instagram after this, but I don't know, man. Like it is such a. I feel like banking is just losing its edge in certain industries where, say, for example, like I came from a tech group and actually it could have saved you days or hours or however long you were doing this whole SBC thing, because that's something that we do a lot of. So a lot of big tech companies like Google, like Facebook, Microsoft, etc., are actually going at it direct in these large M&A deals because they have these huge corp dev teams that are internal ex-bankers evaluating deals and doing it themselves. So it's like, could there be a case where other industries start to do that? Yeah. But like obviously maybe smaller companies or companies that don't prioritize a ton of M&A or even like capital raising stuff, like they'll still need it. But I honestly feel, yeah, it's like companies could save money, take it in-house, and people are seeing that. And then similarly with like IPOs, now like companies doing direct listings, that's another thing where, you know, banks are getting less of a cut of the activity. So they're like getting skinned left and right in certain aspects. Obviously, you're still seeing these headlines of record M&A deals and fees and whatever, but it's finding new ways to monetize. But
well, and it's like I struggle with that and thinking about it because I think like just, you know, about myself and my career path, like I never would be the person that I am without having gone through, you know, those formative years. You know, same for you. And it's like, you know, I learned a lot during those, but now I think about it and it's like, no offense to you or anything, but I mean, I don't actually work as much as I did in banking. I think more. Like you know, we're obviously thinking about this shit all the time because it's much riskier.
Is this why I always hear the Equinox music in the background on calls? Or,
But that's me working. Like, listen, I go to the gym. That's for my mental health. But like, I've created multi-million-dollar ideas by getting 8 hours of sleep and by, you know, prioritizing like living a normal life, even though you're thinking about this stuff 24/7.
Right.
And like, you know, don't you feel that it's like to be at like your full kind of capacity, like for you, like because you're more of a creative than me, like, you know, you really kind of have to like actually access these different sides of your brain than what you were using, like to only being like doing these like rote processing activities. And I think that's something that like has been really interesting to me in the past 6 months. Like what has your take been on that since you've been doing this for longer? Like did you notice you just have to kind of adjust, you know, your persona and kind of, you know, traditional, you know, thought processes, or like how was that adjustment?
Yeah, that's something where it's been big adjustment in the sense that like before when I was in like a seat, right, like in the bullpen or a desk or whatever, like I had to play that part, professional lit, who had to answer yes sir, will do,
Mr. Lit.
yeah, and doing all these things and meeting deadlines and whatever. And then now like I can be free to just shit post whenever I want and lay in bed and scroll Twitter for 10 maybe 20 minutes and just do stuff. But at the same time it's like, yeah, oh fuck, well I can't really just be doing this. I need to set a schedule. I need to what are we going to tackle today? How are we going to make money? How the fuck are we going to be funny again, right? Like that's one thing where it's constantly being you have to be creative at all times, but also finding other ways to generate income streams and also to build stuff. And like that's, I think exec sum is like something where, hey, that's kind of rote and when you think about it, summarizing the news, but it makes money.
Yeah.
Us here recording the podcast, this is, work as well. It's obviously way more fun than being on a fucking conference call with a pissed off CEO.
But it's still like, you have to think about it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the thing for like both of us is like you're constantly thinking about your public persona, how it comes across, and it's like, sometimes it veers more one way than another, but it's like, you never had to think about this at all, when you're working a corporate job. And it's kind of a fascinating thought experiment to be going through,
Yeah, that's true. And I don't know, but like it's fun. It's like actually knowing what you have to do and like you control your own destiny rather than some fucker who just like is creating busy work is much more fulfilling, but I'd say much more anxiety inducing, and stressful, because it's like, it's your baby and you want to see it grow, and if it doesn't, it dies, right? Like I don't think anyone wants their baby to die. So
yeah, I mean, well, and it's like, and if it does, everyone fucking knows, like that's kind of like the one thing I would say it's more stressful in some aspects, but it's less in others. Cause it's like, we're like just doing the damn thing. Like this is exactly who we want to be and what we want to say. And so from that aspect, it doesn't seem stressful, but it's just like a fascinating thought process, but kind of going back. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to just say one story, which I think encapsulates this whole thing of, when you're in the moment, it's the most stressful thing. And like, looking back at it, it's hysterical. And I think, honestly, this is one scene that I could imagine as part of like this fictitious show if we ever get it picked up. Again, if someone's listening, please envision this as like, this was a few years ago. This was when I was changing jobs. And so actually, I didn't have this much stress because I was like, okay, well, I'm not working right now. But I was moving into an apartment with a few roommates, and we rented a U-Haul truck out in Brooklyn. And we were going to be moving across town and also picking up new furniture from IKEA, right? You can shit all you want on IKEA. Like this was, us.
Great like, stuff.
Yeah, great stuff and whatever. But the point is, this was a whole day ordeal. I think it was on a Sunday. And we started and had to pack everything from our apartment into the truck. Then after we did that, which was several hours, we had to then drive to IKEA in Brooklyn, which, just driving in the city in general sucks fucking ass.
I didn't even know they had one in Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's in Red Hook. And so we drove that there, and here's where it starts to get funny. So there's like, those poles or whatever, like it's like clearance height, 8 feet or whatever. It's like those big yellow things like in the parking garages that tell you like, you can't cross here because it's too high with certain vehicles. So we tried this. Yeah, we tried this with the U-Haul, and going over a speed bump. I was like, dude, I don't know, man. It's gonna be a tight fit. And my buddy's driving this, and he hits the top left corner of like the bed truck in the back,
Okay.
the whole storage thing, and you just hear like, and
Oh no.
and like the top left corner was just like wide open, right? So it's like a big hole. I'm like, dude, what the fuck? We're so fucked.
Oh my god.
And like I'm blaming him. I'm like, dude, you should have gone around. Like the thing said clearance 8 feet and whatever. So then we had to get to shopping. So that was like a whole thing, long line. Okay, so fast forward, we start like loading that shit. I look at it again. I'm like, dude, we're gonna get so fucked. He's like, shut the fuck up. Okay, like that's when we started getting pissed at each other. And then we had 2 other roommates that were back in the place, like starting to scope out the new apartment and starting to make sure like we were ready to get there with this entire truck. And there was no parking lot in this new apartment. It was like a one of these streets where you have those little lanes where like the cars can go in there, but then in between that lane and the sidewalk, there's that bike lane, like one of those green bike lanes. So we had to park a U-Haul in one of those things. And
oh man.
And so like it was like 2-hour limit parking, whatever. But we actually didn't realize at the time that section that we had specifically parked in said taxis only. So we were parked in the taxi
I see
only
where this
thing.
is going.
Yeah, and the worst part was that the new apartment was a walk up, and we were on the 4th floor. So so we had a fuck ton of things to do and carry up this apartment building. Meanwhile, like 2 of my friends, like had to work. They were in banking, and Sunday in banking, like they're like, fuck, like I got to move, but hey, I got like to also do this work. So they start bitching like, look, do you think we could get this done? I'm like, I mean, we got 4 stories to load, armoires, couches,
4th story walk up.
Yeah, like armoires, like turning corners and the fucking
What the fuck's an armoire?
It's where you put clothes and shit.
Like a dresser?
Sure, like a dresser. It's a fancier dresser.
Okay, all right. So
IKEA
French
has
dresser.
them.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. We'll check it out this weekend in Red Hook.
Yeah. So so like we're sweaty, we're getting tired. Like this had already turned from like starting in the morning to call it like 6 or 7 p.m. We hadn't gotten dinner. We had one guy like downstairs the whole time to make sure we didn't get towed because we were in that taxi thing. And then the 4th guy, he was like, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention I have to fly out out of LaGuardia. Like this guy was a consultant. And I'm like, dude, no fucking way, man. Like we still have, the new L-shaped couch. We had this massive new like a TV and like all these other things that we still had to like put up there. And it was just, we started losing our tempers with each other. My friend was like still helping out, but like, dude, like shut the fuck up. Like you're not going to the office. Like we need your help because it's not going to be us 2 unloading like everything. And so he kept okay, well now it's like 10 p.m, 11 p.m, like midnight, and this guy's like, dude, I really have to go to the office. And I'm like, well, you're not fucking going, dude. And so eventually he ended up unloading his bed and his dressers and whatever, and this was 1 a.m. He's like, all right guys, well I actually got to go. So he ended up taking a cab all the way downtown at 1, and was sweaty, hadn't showered, hadn't eaten, and like cranked out whatever the fuck he had to crank out, and like came back at like 6 in the morning the following day. But at the in the meantime, I was still there with my buddy, like unpacking shit. I'm like, dude, what the fuck, man? How do we get left with all this shit? So this was around 3 or 4 in the morning for us.
Oh my god.
We were in Midtown Manhattan and then still had to drive the U-Haul back to Red Hook, or not Red Hook, somewhere in Brooklyn where we picked up the U-Haul. And we're sweaty and we're all there, and like the fucking top left corners like chopped off because this guy like rammed into it. And it was just like miserable. But looking back at it, it's so fucking hysterical. Like we wanted to slit each other's throats, but I was like, dude, like I think this will be a hysterical thing, like straight out of Seinfeld or something where you just can't make it up. Like we ended up getting tickets, by the way, from the police, like multiple ones of like, you're parked here illegally and whatever. I'm like, oh, like, as analysts, just having spent a fuck ton of money on furniture, having to deal with the damage of the U-Haul, to getting tickets, to like everything, that was just like moving. And then my friend had to go to work at 1 a.m. So yeah, that was just, looking back at it, like the shit you have to put up with, working in finance.
Wild. Wild. And turning the page, Red, our producer, that is a prompt to insert the whoosh. Maybe I just did it so well. Yeah, wait, you do it? Whoosh. We'll see who has a better, turning the page. So anyway, that's the prompt. But I want to do a little edition of Cash or Pass. It's only going to be one Cash or Pass with this idea that, I have been thinking of really since I started banking. And so I've run this idea by a few people. So I wanted to run it by you just in its full, gravity. It's all of its gravitas, if you will. Right. So, okay. So think of this very much like, we just had the NFL draft, right? So think of this as a draft, but for analysts. Now, all of the banks would be legally required to participate in this, but...
Mark, I have a meme about this, but okay, continue.
Do you? Oh, okay. So, all right. So, let me talk about it, and then let's see. Yeah. So, basically, you have kind of the banks, and so the first pick, that is the bank who did the worst in the league tables. And so you'd have the boutiques. And actually, maybe you got to figure out some way to equalize the boutiques and the bulge brackets. Maybe it's based off of profit per partner or profit per MD, as everyone else would. So it'd be like Centerview would have the lowest pick, Evercore second lowest pick, but the highest pick, that would be like a Nomura or something, right? So so you do it by profits per partner. And so then, the banks, they can also trade picks. It's like, oh, you can trade 2 first rounds, for, 1 first round for 2 second rounds, then a first rounder next year, shit like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's only good for analysts. Everyone, including Centerview, would have to agree to a 2-year analyst program. And then the best part is, too, which I just thought of, so you do like a players union, but, maybe it's like one of us is leading the union. Who knows, right? But so then each bank gets a salary cap, and you can kind of allocate it based off of, certain performance metrics, if you will, for these analysts. And so then you're going to, obviously, you got to know who's good, right? So you have a combine. And so there's like PowerPoint combine, there's an Excel portion, there's public speaking, and then let's say the last part is like the airport test, right? And the airport test is, would you want to spend time at an airport with someone? And so it's like, you'll get like a Chad from UVA who's like Excel, he's a 71 out of 100. PowerPoint, he's 85. Then public speaking, he's good. He's 91. Airport test, 99. Like, chill guy, right? Is he the best at Excel? But then you have, like, Pierre, who went to, like, INSEAD, which allegedly is a real school. He's, like, at Excel. He's a 95. So way better than Chad. PowerPoint, like, 93. Not as good as Excel, but still pretty good. Public speaking, and he's good at public speaking, but airport test like 43 because he's French and he just sucks. Sorry to our French viewers.
Yeah, no, that's accurate.
Yeah, right. Like what do you think?
Ooh,
and then
Americans,
right.
Horribly.
And you're like, no, fuck that. I'm not hanging out with Pierre again at fucking LaGuardia. Even in the new terminal, fuck that. But then it's like, if a bank, if they get fined or something, so it's like, the like the Wellses of the world and stuff and all this, Credit Suisse is, they'd be having to forfeit picks in the future based off of stuff. So it really affects everyone. But what are your thoughts on that? And how can we, what would you improve upon? What would you change if we could?
Well, okay. So this is kind of different.
And how does that differ from your meme?
So I just forwarded this to you. Yeah, pull up the
on Slack?
Instagram. No, on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah. So mine was back in 2020 around the private equity draft, which I think it's very similar, right? And so I think both could be pretty interesting.
Private equity draft. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think like for the investment banking draft, that is like something where there are more established players. It's like there's only like 32 of like these major, like teams in the NFL, and like in on Wall Street you have the bulge brackets, right? Then you have the boutiques, and like they're not really changing that much. So versus like in the private equity realm, like okay, you have maybe like with these big mega funds, and then like thousands of just like irrelevant, middle market funds.
And, exactly. It'd be harder to control, right?
Yeah. So I could definitely see there being more structure to a investment banking draft, but I totally think that's the best thing. And like, just imagine the top of like Harvard or Wharton's like undergrads going to Nomura and like helping them, whatever, like crank out the best deals. But honestly, I don't think that will help the deal flow because it will have to come down to the MDs. But I don't know, like that's the part where you'd have to figure out where can like the people that are getting drafted actually make the most difference. And that would have to be like, because if you have a running back or whatever, like they'll actually change the team. A good analyst.
Yeah, like it's like well, you can talk about it from performance base, or it's like so if Credit Suisse sponsors group, right? Like they got a lot of like cool UVA guys, right? But you add another Chad to sponsors at CF, it doesn't move the needle, right? But you take that guy and you throw him in the healthcare group at Lazard, that fucking that changes the whole group, right? Like it just changes the dynamics. So I get what you're saying.
The dynamics, yeah. I think the dynamics will definitely change. Then that would be like much needed for certain groups out there. I mean, I don't know what other groups outside of TMT look like, but I feel like TMT just draws in like the most nerdy fucking dudes and everyone just like who's there for actual just work. And that's it. And like, that's their fucking life. And a lot of them are like ex-engineers or, they studied math or whatever because they like tech or telecom. Telecom people are like the most, I'll just leave it there. It's just, the most
tech,
boring
media,
shit.
and telecom.
Yeah. Tech and media are great. Telecom, not so much. But all that said, it's like the point is, I think culturally this would be hysterical, and I'd love to do it.
Yeah, it could be a TV show in and of itself. Maybe we should make that a little skit. I could write that. That would be funny.
Yeah, why don't we actually host our own draft? And but like we can televise it, we could do whatever and make it fun. But you know what else I think would be very, very funny is us hosting an Excel World Cup. You know those things exist, right?
Yeah, no one does that.
So imagine like, on a Twitch stream, you have like the top analysts and like these people are just looking all mean and just like flexing like, I fucking like an LBO and like from scratch in 10 minutes. And then it's like, oh shit, dude. Yeah. Like, I think, he's got a lot of experience, or, she was on that Twitter deal, watch out. And then you give them like a case study, and there's kind of like a pretty, like standardized answer that you get to, but the way that you judge is like by the formatting, by
and we'd have judges.
Yeah, like the sophistication of the formulas, like not equals if like or, it's like equals and or whatever.
Yeah, like you're getting docked by putting a plus sign at the beginning of a formula because you're a boomer, and like you don't need to do that anymore. Like shit like that, like very nuanced stuff.
Yeah.
So I like that. Don't they already have the world like Excel championships though?
Yeah, but they're like doing weird
bullshit. Like we're doing the World Excel Banking Championships. And what would the grand prize be? Maybe we should get a sponsor in on this.
Yeah, and like hire someone to KKR.
How do we prevent kids from cheating? We do it in person and film it?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
In person. Yeah, like you do it in, I don't know, the auditorium of like the Goldman Sachs, whatever. I don't know.
I want to work at the Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, okay. I like it. Let's do it. On that note, if anyone has any interest in or any ideas further with this, any interest in it, like let us know. We're gonna set this up. I love it.
Excel World Cup brought to you by Litquidity. Fucking put that on your calendars.
It will be excellent. And with that, and no one laughed, but that's showbiz, baby.
This has been Big Swinging Decks by Litquidity with your hosts, Lit and Mark Moran. This is a Red Rock Music podcast. Our executive producer is Red Yoakum. Our associate producer is Emma Martins. For more, follow us on Instagram at Litquidity and at It's Mark Moran, or visit the official website liquidity.co. So tune in weekly to your Managing Director Secretary's favorite podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.